Do you regret not sounding the sirens?
I do not.
By now, everyone has heard something about the devastating fires that wiped out the town of Lahaina on the island of Maui, Hawaii. But many weeks later, we still don't have answers to basic questions. We know that too many people died, but how many? 100? 1,000? More? We don't know. We also don't know how something this devastating could have happened. This is the deadliest fire on American soil in memory, but how is it that government officials were so ill prepared? Could nothing else have been done? As we dig deeper, a pattern is emerging that might explain the lack of answers from government officials.
You've been the worst mayor we could possibly imagine. Respect what? This is the most dismal response we've ever had.
Certainly, the deadly combination of near-hurricane winds and fast-burning wildfires was going to cause destruction. But there are other factors, man-made, caused by government, and well-known by government officials, that made the fires that decimated the residents of Lahaina so catastrophic. This was, in fact, a perfect storm of government failure. The conditions for such a tragedy were put in place years ago when Hawaii's land use laws prevented housing from being built near the island's many farms. These restrictions prevented new development of lands and caused home prices to skyrocket, making it impossible for farm workers to afford them. Without workers, many of the farms shut down and were abandoned. While active farms routinely set controlled fires to keep underbrush under control, the vacant ones were quickly overgrown with invasive, highly flammable grass, just waiting for a stray spark.
Making matters worse was the fact that invasive, highly flammable grasses have invaded the island. In fact, according to one expert, they now cover over 1 million acres of land.
And much of that land was owned and controlled by the Hawaiian Department of Education and a charitable trust established in the 1800s to fund the education of Native Hawaiians. This trust is the largest private landowner in Hawaii, and it owns a significant portion of the lands above Lahaina, an area overrun with the highly flammable grasses. This tinderbox of unkept lands was a well-known problem, but studies and commissions were systematically ignored. Here's how the Wall Street Journal describes it. County and state authorities failed to act on years of reports warning about the dangers of the grasses, according to a review of public records and interviews. There were few rules on managing the vegetation, and the large landowners that now control much of the area, including the state of Hawaii, a major educational foundation, and a prolific local developer, had few incentives to mitigate the hazard. Everybody knew it. A disaster was waiting to happen. All that was needed was one spark. That spark eventually came from the state's deteriorating and mismanaged electrical grid, after a 2015 law required Hawaii to fully switch to renewable energy by 2045. Scarce resources were shifted to focus on achieving this fantastical goal.
Another story that we need to focus on as well. Shares of Hawaiian Electric are tumbling, this after concern that it was its power lines that caused the deadly Maui wildfires.
Hawaiian Electric, which is effectively a state-granted monopoly serving 95% of residents, shifted resources away from maintaining their current infrastructure, including massive decreases in funding for wildfire prevention. Again, the risks of a devastating fire were well known, but political priorities were focused on green energy goals. After a series of fires in 2019, a safety review revealed that power lines were emitting dangerous sparks, but little was done to correct the problem. There was more money to be had in complying with the government's green mandates, and electricity providers understood that responding to political demands was their number one business priority. They were politically captured. And politics doesn't deal with trade-offs and opportunity costs. We now count those costs in lives lost and a robust community devastated. Just following orders. In a final act of mindless government power, Maui police erected barricades across major roads that prevented locals from fleeing the fires.
Before 3:30 p.m., Amanda Cassidy is among the early evacuees. She leaves Lahaina Luna Makai of the bypass, but in this photo she says when she reaches Lahaina Luna Road and the highway, It's blocked off by an officer not just to the north, but south as well.
The Associated Press reported that those who defied the police and drove around the barricades survived, while many others who obediently waited or turned back did not. This begs the question, did government officials have no exit strategy? Was there a disaster mitigation strategy in place at all? Did they follow the evacuation plan? Devastated survivors have a right to know what exactly went wrong. The answer to these questions is, again, abject government failure. According to the LA Times, even though officials had long known about the risk of a major blaze, a review of records and interviews showed that there was no fire evacuation plan for Lahaina that was widely available to the public. The blaze arrived with such a fury that many people ran into the ocean, with some struggling to remain afloat as they choked on smoke. Others were trapped in their cars as they tried to flee along jammed, narrow roads. Residents have said they got no or little notice of the fire and that evacuation efforts were chaotic. Hawaii's Community Wildfire Protection Plan for West Maui, dated from 2014, notes that while evacuation protocols exist for tsunamis, fire safety zones in West Maui are yet to be determined. That's right, the plan to keep people safe from a well-known wildfire threat, a slow-motion nightmare decades in the making, was, according to government officials, yet to be determined. Can we learn from this? I hope so. But to fix the government failures that led to so much destruction and loss of life, we need to first acknowledge the gross neglect and perverse incentives that caused them. We need to find honest, community-based solutions. We need accountability, not just politics as usual.
A lot of it's gone, and a lot of it is going to be just pictures and books and memories. And that's it. Among all the things that we in West Maui grieve, it's grieving for the loss of our culture.